And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service in Alaska region, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Sunday, December 1st, 2024, and we start out with the sea ice. The ice has been allowed to really build and grow out across the far north along the Arctic coast down into the Chukchi Sea. Even some open water that was down here in the lower Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait, is filling quickly in with the new ice formation. We're also seeing some rather brisk northeasterly offshore winds, especially from around the Bering Strait down along areas of the southwestern coast, as a pocket of Arctic air has pushed off the YK deltas and now is passing through the Pribilov Islands. That cold pocket of air crossing the Bering will make it all the way south and west there of the central Aleutians later tonight and on Monday morning. But with these brisk northeast winds, it is helping to pull some of this ice away from the immediate shoreline while sending some of the ice more to the west. And that drift will continue as we go through the day on Monday. Actually early in the week. So late tonight into early Monday morning, there's the surface reflection of that pocket of colder air that does have some snow showers and snow squalls associated with it as it heads toward the south and west. Low pressure that's come up with a front, milder air is gradually lifting northward across the southern southwestern portion of the Panhandle. The moderate to heavy snow in the northern parts of the Panhandle will continue tonight before tapering off early Monday morning. An additional 6 to as much as 12 inches of snow could fall along areas of the icy Strait corridor in through the Juneau location, and as a result, winter storm warnings continue there through early on Monday morning. There's going to be yet another low come up out of the North Pacific as we go into Tuesday. The colder air just kind of pulls further south and west through the Aleutian chain, lower Bering Sea. The old front just kind of washes out, and then here comes and actually a little stronger low. It's going to be passing south of Kodiak Island on Tuesday afternoon, heading toward the middle Alaska Peninsula, pushing another front that's going to have even milder air and moisture with it. So coastal areas will get rain. We're going to see that rain spread further north with temperatures in the 40s, even some 50-degree readings with this front as it pushes up into the southern Panhandle. So definitely a warmer system. This is going to be the trend as we go into early mid-December. Weather systems coming up out of the North Pacific into the Gulf will keep the immediate Gulf Coast wet. Areas, the intercoastal mountains, and depending on how far inland the snow comes or the precipitation comes, it'll be in the form of snow, especially there in through the mountains. But we're still looking at windier conditions Monday. Southeast gales 40 knots, Dixon entrance, waves upwards of 10-14 feet there outside of Ketchikan, Metlakatla. East winds 25 knots, Stevens Passage. North winds 20 knots, gust 40 knots, Lynn Canal. We still have that convergence, some low-level wind shear associated with that frontal boundary that's going to be draped through the central lower southern part of the northern Panhandle as we go through the day Monday. Outer coast, look for south winds 25 to 30 knots south of Sitka, becoming east outside of Gustavus and the icy Strait, south of Yakutat Bay there, 20 to 25 knots. And then for Tuesday, we have north winds that'll be 20 knots there, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage with 4-foot waves. Southeast gales to 35 knots, Dixon entrance to off of Craig, south of Sitka. Waves 13 to as high as 16, 17 feet as you get out in the nearshore waters of the Gulf. East winds outside the icy Strait up to Cape Suckling right around 30 knots with 14 to 17-foot waves. The northwestern Gulf within Prince William Sound, 10-knot northeasterly winds on Monday, 2-foot waves. Along the Kenai coast, 25-knot northeasterly winds down to just outside there of Kodiak City. Lower Cook Inlet, we're at Anchor Point down toward the entrance, 30-knot northeasterly winds with waves of 8 to 9 feet. And then the winds really crank up because I told you that second system with another front coming into the Gulf. So ahead of that front, we're looking at northeasterly gales here along the nearshore waters of the Gulf to 40 knots outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, off the Kenai coast as high as 45 knots there just northeast of Kodiak Island with waves running 13, 15 feet. Lower Cook Inlet off of Anchor Point down into Kamishak Bay, east to northeast gales 35 to 40 knots, waves 9 to 11 feet. For Monday, Kodiak Island will see northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, waves around 7 feet, Shelikof Strait and on the east side of the island. As we trail out along the Alaska Peninsula, generally northeast winds from around 20 knots down to 15 knots there, Cold Bay and False Pass. And then on Tuesday, with that area of low pressure coming up from the south, it's going to be situated in this area. We have northeast gales of 40 knots within Shelikof Strait, 11-foot waves, 30-knot easterly winds, 13-foot waves off of Akiak, and then 35-knot gales there just east of Chiknik, and 30-knot winds out of Bristol Bay. But as we drop down toward Cold Bay, False Pass, north winds 15 to 20 knots. And across the Aleutians on Monday, we have this weak low center that's associated with that pocket of Arctic air that continues slowly drifting toward the southwest. Variable winds 10 knots around the far eastern Aleutians, Dutch Harbor on Alaska. And then as we get back Atka, Adak, westward winds will be more northerly, 20 to 25 knots. And for Tuesday, we still have that weak circulation just kind of sitting here in the central Aleutians. Winds north-northwest on far eastern Aleutians, variable around Nikolsky at 10 knots. And then as we get out further west, those winds pick back up to the north-northwest, 30 knots out over the far western Aleutians, west of Kiska through Shimei and Attu. And then along the west coast, winds will be out of the east-northeast, 25 knots out of Bristol Bay, along the YK Delta out of Norton Sound with that ice in place. As high as 30-knot northeast to east winds there, St. Matthew down to St. Paul. Waves could be as high as 14 feet around St. Matthew. And then Tuesday, winds continue out of the northeast, that offshore flow off of the mainland, 30 knots out of Bristol Bay, 20 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay, and basically about 25 knots out of Norton Sound and along the lower Yukon coast, as high as 30 knots still out there around St. Matthew. But again, there is ice in place along these areas of the west coast. And then as we look at Monday here, the Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence, northeasterly winds 25 knots, ice filling in through these areas. Any open water, waves can run as high as, say, 7 to 9 feet north side of St. Lawrence Island. As we get up along the Arctic coast, east to northeast winds at 10 knots from Utqiagvik through Kaktovik. And then on Tuesday, those east-northeast winds will pick up 25 to 30 knots there, Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik, 20 to 25 knots as we drop down along the Chukchi Sea coast from Utqiagvik through Wainwright to off of Cape Lisburne. And then as we drop down through the Bering Strait and onto the north side of St. Lawrence Island, look for northeasterly winds to 30 knots. And if there is any open water, waves could be running as high as 8 to 13 feet on Tuesday.